They said I was sweet. Sweet like honey, slow, soft, agreeable. Sweet like sugar, dissolving into everyone else's coffee, never bitter enough to spit out. But they never saw the flame beneath the sugar. My name is Elise. And I've learned how to disappear in a room full of people talking about visibility. I work at a San Francisco ad tech firm, the kind that thrives on words like sync, collab, and circle back. The kind where success looks like confidence, even if it's hollow. And I'm a ghost in vintage blazers. Quiet enough to be ignored. Efficient enough to be indispensable. They don't realize how dangerous a quiet girl becomes when you give her time to watch. It started with the coffee cups. Every morning, Greg strolled into the kitchen, picked up a compostable lid like he owned the world, and asked no one in particular, "Hey, any of you legends solving revenue this week?" It was always a joke. Always a show. Then he'd glance over at me, not unkindly, and say something like, "Ellie's probably halfway to cracking it already." I'd smile. Nod. Say nothing. They liked me best when I didn't speak. They trusted me more when I kept ideas in bullet points and buried compliments in caveats. I learned how to shrink in meetings, and still make my slide decks louder than any voice in the room. We were prepping for a new client pitch. Big money. Big data. Big potential. I spent 3 weeks building a revenue attribution model so sharp it cut through their jargon like silk. I tested it. Validated it. Designed the entire visual flow. I even gave it a name, quietly, in the metadata, Poppy. After the wildflowers that bloom in fire seasons. Greg liked the visuals. He liked the colors. And he loved how the board would react. "Let's run this through the pipeline, Elise. Real fast. I'll take it upstairs to Alex." I nodded. I always nodded. I didn't know it then, that this was the last time my idea would belong to me. At the next all hands, Greg presented it. Branded it as * Project Blaze. * same color scheme. Same flows. Even the test case I built. Not once did he say my name. Slack exploded with applause emojis. Even our CMO dropped under the deck. And then came the joke. Honestly, Elise told me it was a bit much, she's too sensitive to the fire metaphors. Laughter. Even I laughed. What else could I do? I walked to the restroom. Locked the stall. Sat on the toilet seat like it was a pew. And I felt it. Not just rage. Not just sadness. But something else. Something quiet. And final. A kind of funeral inside my chest, not for the idea he stole. But for the part of me that ever thought they would protect it. Back at my desk, he leaned in again. "Ellie, you good? You're too sweet to be mad at me." I smiled. Because it's always easier to stay sweet when you're sharpening your knives in silence. "I'm great," I said. "You're right, it's better coming from you." And in that moment, I saw it. The mistake he'd made. He stole fire. And now I'd let him burn. They gave Greg the quarter's spotlight. Official announcement. Slide with his photo. * spearheaded a bold new approach to cross-channel revenue attribution. * I stared at the word spearheaded, it felt like reading the eulogy of a still living part of me. He stood beside Alex, our director, during the client pitch. I sat in the back, for support. No one asked me to present. No one even remembered that the data queries he was showcasing, still pulled from a table that had my initials in the back-end notes. The client loved it. Greg walked out of the boardroom glowing like a god. "We nailed it," he grinned at me. "Did you see their faces? This is going to change everything." I said nothing. I felt like I was watching a heist happen through glass. "You should feel proud," he added. "It was a team effort." I stared at him. Greg always made it sound like inclusion. When it was erasure. That evening, the company celebrated with rooftop drinks. Someone brought cupcakes. Someone else brought kombucha on tap. I stood at the railing, watching the skyline blink in slow, stupid patterns. He came up behind me, drink in hand, and leaned in like we were friends. "Still with me, Ellie?" I hated how he called me Ellie. Like he was trying to soften something. "You've been quiet," he said. "Just overwhelmed," I replied. He smirked. "Don't overthink it. You're brilliant. Sensitive, but brilliant." There it was again. Sensitive. Like it was a flaw. Like it was a weakness. Like it gave him permission. Later that night, I checked Slack again. Buried in one of the joke threads was this. Greg, if I say Project Blaze 3 times in the mirror, does Elise show up with another spreadsheet? And below it. Product lead, just make sure she doesn't cry on it. And worst of all. CMO, shoo, she might write an angry blog. Hashtag too sensitive. They had tagged me. They had tagged me. I closed my laptop. Walked barefoot across my apartment. The silence felt heavier than their laughter. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. Not because of the joke, but because I needed to see her. The girl they kept calling sensitive. The girl who sat quietly while they devoured her ideas. I stared at my own eyes. I didn't look angry. I didn't look sad. I looked done. Let them laugh, I whispered. They think this is the punchline. I reached for my old notebook, the one with sketches, drafts, and versions they'd never seen. I flipped to the original Poppy model. The one with annotations in red pen, not digital font. My fingerprint was all over this. They'd taken my fire. But they forgot I had more matches. The next day, I walked in like nothing happened. That's the thing about quiet women. We don't confront. We construct. I didn't quit. I came in every day, sat in the same seat, wore the same gray trench coat, and nodded in the same polite rhythm. They thought I was healing. But I wasn't healing. I was recording. Cataloging every smirk, every Slack message, every joke they made at my expense. I became the company ghost, haunting Google Sheets and hiding footprints in metadata. I started packing lunches instead of joining the team. Pasta, always. Something about spirals felt honest. I stopped laughing at his jokes. I stopped saying nice deck in meetings. I stopped filling silence with suggestions. They called it a rough patch. Said I was probably going through something. Greg even pulled me aside in the kitchen once. You know, I miss your energy. You've been distant. Just recalibrating, I said. That word made him blink. He didn't know how to respond to a version of me that didn't seek approval. He wasn't used to silence he couldn't fill. I spent my evenings in the quiet. Coffee table cluttered with old notebooks. Backups. Diagrams. Paper trails. Every original version of Project Blaze, timestamped, watermarked, annotated by me. I even found a handwritten page with the initial acronym that spelled P.O.P.P.Y. Predictive Optimization Protocol, powered by you. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was clever. But because even my handwriting was proof. They'd stolen the product. But not the process. Not the person who built it. I ordered a voice recorder. Not the digital kind. The analog kind, black, heavy, with a red button that made a solid click when pressed. I started carrying it in my tote. Not for legal reasons. But for me. So I could capture the tone in his voice when he said things like, "We're just trying to scale your idea. You're part of the legacy, Elise." Legacy. As if I had died. A week later, I sat in the elevator with Greg. Just the two of us. 5 floors down. He was checking his reflection in the chrome door. "Alex wants me to run the next client sprint," he said, casual. I stared ahead. That's great. They're calling me the attribution guy now. I smiled faintly. Just make sure you remember how it started. He chuckled. You're too humble. Always have been. And then, you know, Ellie, you could go far if you just weren't so precious about things. He said it like it was advice. I turned to him, finally. And you could go farther if you didn't need someone else's wings. His eyes narrowed, just a flicker. And then the doors opened. I stepped out first. That night, I stared at my shoes by the door. Worn leather loafers, scuffed at the toes. I thought of all the steps they had walked through this company. All the rooms I had entered quietly. All the rooms I would soon own. Not through anger. Through architecture. I pulled up the client deck again. The one Greg was rehearsing for next week's boardroom pitch. I noticed something. A small annotation error, a footnote that still referenced Elise's Flow model version 2.3. He hadn't cleaned it properly. That was the first crack in his glass house. And I was done waiting for karma. I didn't need revenge right away. What I needed was a system. So I built one. I stopped logging in from my work laptop. Created a mirror drive on a separate machine, storing everything, proof of ideation, timestamps, git commits, metadata logs. I dug out every draft Greg had forwarded with my attachments intact. I exported Slack threads. The jokes. The tag. The emojis. All of it, screenshot, saved, dated. The betrayal had become a case study. And I was both the subject and the scientist. But this wasn't about HR, no. This was about performance. And he had made one critical mistake. He thought he could carry a flame he didn't start. I started feeding Greg ideas again. Softly. Strategically. Little breadcrumbs during team syncs. I was playing around with a forecast visualization, might work for the client deck. Oh, I had a weird dream about using spatial mapping for ad clusters. He bit every time. Dropped my concepts into his notes like borrowed jewelry. And I let him. Because I needed him to wear it to the gala. Meanwhile, I reconnected with Natalie, our former product designer. She had left 6 months ago for a startup. We'd bonded once over chamomile tea and imposter syndrome. I reached out. Remember Poppy? It's not dead. She called me immediately. I sent her everything. She listened in silence for a long time. And then she said, "Let me know when you want to relaunch. I'll design it for free." Sometimes revenge begins with someone believing you again. By month's end, I had 3 things. 1. A quietly rebranded version of Poppy, cleaner, better, mine. 2. Natalie's sleek new UX prototype, hosted on my personal Git. 3. Greg's voice, recorded during a rehearsal pitch saying, "This one's all me." Just pure instinct. The client pitch was set for Friday. The big boardroom. C-level execs. The kind of meeting where names get remembered. Greg was ready. New haircut. Fresh shoes. Oversized confidence. And right before the meeting, I handed him a coffee. Smiled like old times. "You've got this," I said. "They'll eat it up." He winked. "Always could count on you, Ellie." What he didn't know was that I'd updated one of the demo links in his deck. A tiny redirect in the analytics showcase. It now led to a mirrored version. With my watermark on every slide. And a recorded video intro that opened like this. "Hi. I'm Elise. Creator of the attribution model you're about to see." I didn't sit in the pitch that day. I watched from the other side of the glass. Arms folded. Eyes steady. The moment came at slide 6. The link played. My voice filled the room. Greg froze. Alex turned toward him. Someone from marketing gasped. He tried to click out. But it was too late. My name was on the screen. My voice was in the air. My proof was public. I walked away from the glass. I didn't need to see his face. I already knew the color of panic. That evening, Natalie sent me a DM. The look on their faces was priceless. I replied. You should have seen his when he realized I wasn't in the room. He stormed into the open space after the meeting. Breath tight. Shirt half untucked. Eyes darting like he'd just been chased by his own shadow. People looked up from their keyboards. Slack was already alive. I didn't have to read it to know. Greg had presented a deck that turned on him like a live wire. I stayed seated. Calm. I sipped the same lukewarm office coffee they all drank. But mine tasted like a rival. He marched toward me. What the hell was that? I looked up, serene, composed. You mean the voiceover? That was me. You remember me, right? He blinked. You sabotaged the pitch. No, I said. You did that when you decided the truth didn't matter. He stared, waiting for me to break, cry, defend, explain. But I didn't flinch. I just pushed back my chair, stood slowly, and walked past him into the elevator. Didn't look back. Not because I was dramatic. Because I knew he would follow. He did. The doors closed. Just the two of us. Again. 5th floor to lobby. Only this time, I had the silence and the floor. You know what hurts most? I said. Not that you stole it. That you mocked me for caring. He stayed quiet. You could have built your own flame. I'd have helped you. I always helped you. The elevator hummed. But instead, you laughed. You watched them laugh. And you let them believe I was small. He swallowed. I didn't mean, yes, you did. And it worked. Until it didn't. I turned to face him. You taught me something, Greg. Silence isn't survival. It's strategy. You manipulated me. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Because when you did it, they called it leadership. The elevator chimed. Lobby. I stepped out first again. He didn't follow. That afternoon, HR scheduled a meeting. Not with me. With him. Apparently, the client had called. Asked why a project credited to Greg opened with my name, asked why the board hadn't been told sooner about the original developer. The CMO messaged me privately, "Let's talk. There's space here if you want to lead the rebuild." I stared at the message for a long time. Then closed the tab. That night, I took off my shoes at the door. Same worn leather. But something felt different. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just truer. I walked to my mirror. No more ghost. No more echo. Just me. A woman who had been sweet. Then silenced. Then strategic. Now sovereign. A week passed. Then another. Greg's Slack icon grayed out. Then his name disappeared from the org chart. No goodbye post. No farewell cupcakes. Just deleted. A whisper with no witness. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just marked the date on a sticky note, the day the silence stopped protecting him. HR followed up again. Formal this time. They asked me to speak at the next executive roundtable. Not as a guest. As a creator. They wanted to spotlight employee-driven innovation. A sanitized phrase for, "We know you were the engine all along," I agreed. But only on my terms. The room was smaller than I expected. C-levels. Advisors. Natalie on Zoom. A few wide eyes, a few wary smiles. I wore the gray trench coat. The same one I'd worn on the day they erased me. I left it unbuttoned this time. Underneath, a poppy red blouse. Subtle. Poetic. Mine. I spoke. Not in anger. Not in apology. Just fact. I told them how Poppy began. On a piece of paper. In the corner of a shared office. Between coffee cups and dismissal. I told them about value. And who defines it. And what it costs when you ignore the hands that built it. They listened. Not because I demanded it. But because they had no choice. After the session, one of the advisors approached me. "Why didn't you speak up earlier?" I smiled softly. Because power looks different on everyone. I was never quiet. You just weren't listening. He nodded, slowly. Walked away. And just like that, the room tilted. Just enough to feel it. I didn't stay at the company. I left 2 months later. Not in anger. In authority. I launched a small studio with Natalie. We called it Ellipsis, a nod to what comes next when the sentence isn't over. People still ask me why I didn't take legal action. Why I let Greg walk out instead of burn. And I tell them this. The goal was never to scorch the earth. The goal was to remind it who planted the seed. 1 year later, at an AdTech conference in Lisbon, I stepped onto a different stage. This time, as a keynote. I wore red. They called me visionary. They asked me about leadership. And I said, start by listening to the ones you keep calling too sensitive. They're probably the ones holding your future. Let them think I was soft. That's what made the blades so quiet.